Hello, welcome to another edition of Data in the Hallway. My name is Ray Paik, Community Manager at PingCAP. I'm joined by my colleague Daniel, joining us again from the Netherlands. Welcome, Daniel. Good to see you
Hello.
again. And very excited to talk about an issue that's very important, but it's probably not spoken about too often. I want to talk about digital accessibility. This is something that we thought of finding a guest for. And serendipitously, we had a Docs hackathon earlier this year, and one of our community members, Chrissy Belzy, submitted a PR that was related to accessibility. And then through Chrissy, I got to meet Emma, so talk. I mean, another proof point about the wonderful nature of open source. I get to meet somebody not just working on accessibility, but somebody from my perspective on the other side of the earth in Sweden. So Emma, welcome. Good to have you here. So Emma, I'll let you introduce yourself, but Emma is a software developer and accessibility specialist at FeatureIce, like I said, in Sweden. So Emma, welcome again, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Yep, as you already said, my name is Emma. I'm a software developer from Sweden, and I actually was a teacher for many years before I became a developer. So I decided to retrain about 3 or 4 years ago now. And one of my first internships was at a company that specialized in accessibility, which, along with my background from teaching, where I always had to, adapt lessons for children with different abilities, different needs. And then this experience of working with accessibility in websites really sparked my interest, and it hasn't stopped from there. So yeah,
Right.
That's a little bit about me.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think when I first met you, I think I was telling you about there are a lot of people in Silicon Valley who've been in tech for a long time. They sort of transition into like teaching to do something different, and they want to do something for the community, for their like a local community, and you sort of went the other route. I know you like a taught for a long time. You work with a lot of primary school students, so obviously you have a lot of patience and working with people with different needs. So I guess let's talk about something. We'll start with something basic. So what is accessibility? I mean, what are some of the challenges that some people face? And then with different people with different like challenges, what are some of the obstacles they face, like reading documentations or visiting somebody's web pages? So.
Yeah, so accessibility is all about making things accessible or making them available to everybody. So everybody has different needs. People with disabilities sometimes have different needs to people that, can go into a website and just look at it and read it and that kind of thing. So people with a visual impairment or blindness may need either to enlarge the screen quite a lot so they can see it, or they might need to use a screen reader, which will actually read everything on the screen for them. People with color blindness might struggle if you only use colors to indicate different things on a web page. People that are deaf or hard of hearing, they may need captions or transcripts if you have videos on your web page. So it's like a whole plethora of different disabilities. There's also cognitive disabilities. Some people might struggle with reading or remembering what they've read. There's a whole range of things that you have to consider when you're building a website. It's not just that everyone can come and look at the one page, and it unfortunately doesn't just work for everyone out of the box.
Yeah, so I mean, I think like for a lot of people like me, especially with documentation or website, like accessibility challenges, I think we tend to associate it with like a visual impairment, but obviously that's not the case. You talk about hearing, and even with visually impaired, it's just not blindness. It's like seeing different colors, and um, and other challenges that people face. So, I mean, roughly, like, I mean, are there statistics in terms of what percentage of population typically have challenges with normal documentations and web pages that people create? Like,
I don't know if there's specific numbers
mm,
of how many people struggle with websites and documentation, but
mm,
um, for like the world, the population of like disabled people is around 15%.
okay.
So they say 15 to 20% of people are disabled in some way, and
Mm,
around 2 to 4% are severely disabled. So yeah, and those disabilities can cover a whole spectrum of things from visual disabilities, mobility disabilities, hearing,
mm,
cognitive, that kind of thing.
right.
Would it include things like dyslexia as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes some people that have dyslexia and certain disabilities like that don't necessarily class themselves as disabled.
Mm,
So the number of disabled people may actually be a lot larger than the official numbers recognize.
right. Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a good point, Daniel, about dyslexia, because there's in certain societies there's still like a stigma about like dyslexia. I mean, people feel like they're just not intelligent enough to comprehend the reading or comprehend this like a large text, but it's not nothing about intelligence. It's like it's actually a disability. And then, Emma, I mean, as a former teacher, you probably dealt with a lot of students like that who had a lot of confidence issue because reading difficulties, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And it tends to be underreported, like even in the US where it's often talked about at schools. So cool. So um, so so continuing on the conversation. So what are typical issues that you typically see in documentations and web pages that are generated at tech companies? And hopefully you had a chance to look at some of our documentations and web pages, and you can be as critical as you can be, because that's something that we probably need to work on. Like, what are some of the typical examples that you see on the web page and the web content?
Yeah, sure. So like generally, the thing with documentation is always going to be like the reading level and trying to make sure that it's not using too many acronyms and abbreviations, that it's easy for people to understand when they do read it, and that it's nice short paragraphs, really clear, like bullet pointed or even numbered instructions, if that's the case. One of the things that you often notice if you go to a website is I quite like doing what's called the tab test. And
Mm-hmm.
very simply, you start at the top of the page and you just start pressing tab, and you see if you can reach all of the interactive elements on the page. And that's one of the things I did notice when I went to PingCAP is that if you press the tab button, you can't actually reach all of the interactive elements on the page. So there are
Oh, okay.
so if you're in like the mobile view,
Mm-hmm.
and you open like the mobile navigation, you can't actually tab through all of the elements in like the drop down bars. And if you go
Right.
to I think one of the pages, you have like a side panel, and you actually can't reach anything in the side panel with the tab key. So there's like small things like that some people don't use a mouse to navigate around. Either because they might have like a problem with their like dexterity, so they can't use a mouse, they might just use the
Right.
keyboard, but they can see. And then screen reader users, for example, won't use the mouse because they can't see what's on the screen, so they will navigate around by a keyboard as well. So yeah, things like, and then I would say if you have videos, always make sure like that they've got captions and things, so that people don't need to have the sound on to be able to follow along what's going on.
Right. So yeah, I know some of the accessibility discussions. I've seen some of the issues in our repo, Daniel, but I don't know if this is like a tabbing and making sure that tabbing gets you to all the interactive elements, if that's one of the issues. But if not, then that's another thing we can add to our list, I guess. But So,
Yeah, I think the thing with the tab is that it's easy for everyone to do. Like you don't need
mhm,
special software or settings for it.
mhm,
So that's a easy, quick start to see how things work.
mhm,
And that's both true for our documentation and for like the TiDB Cloud console, where people
mhm.
might be operating our product.
Right. Right. Cool. And Emma, I think you brought up an interesting, uh, discussion about like mobile platforms. I mean, that's even like 10 years ago, like I don't think people read a lot of documentation on your phones, but that's not the case anymore. So I wonder, like, is that like now that people are making accessing content more on the mobile platforms, that increasing the complexity of what we need to do in terms of addressing accessibility for content, or
I mean, I would say as long as you follow the responsive design, that
mm,
usually means that it won't make it more complex on a mobile phone than on
okay,
on a desktop.
right,
I think basically you have to kind of think about that, not to hide too much of the functionality. If you're scaling it downwards onto a
mm,
mobile phone, people still need to be able to achieve the same kind of things. And then just thinking about, can you avoid using like drag and drops to
mm,
only do things? Can you avoid swipe carousels, that kind of thing? Or if you do use them, is there another way that they can work without having to drag and drop or having to swipe left and right?
mm,
Mm.
cool, yeah. So I mean, and you mentioned earlier that you just went through like a career transition like several years ago when you stopped teaching. Uh, is accessibility, because I mean it's been a long time since I got my like a formal education. Is are there training readily available for accessibility topics, or is this something that most people have to sort of figure out on their own on how to improve accessibility for people with different needs?
Yeah, I mean, I found it quite difficult to find resources. There are one
Mm,
or two courses out there now, that a couple that you can find for free. Like Google has a very basic learn accessibility on their web dev site.
mm,
Um, but if you want to jump into the more complex things, then you're looking at buying like more expensive courses, or
mm.
just spending a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time reading different blogs and
Okay,
following people on Twitter and on Slack and
right,
that kind of thing. And
right.
yeah,
Yeah, because I was wondering, like, I mean, not that having a course at a university is going to solve all the problems. Like, are they even available? Is what I wondered about. Like, if you go to a university to get your computer science degree, is there even as an elective, do you even have an opportunity to take a semester-long course in accessibility? It was, yeah, what I was curious about.
I think it would definitely depend on the university. Like I
Mm,
obviously can't speak about American universities, but
mm,
the course that I studied was 2 years long, and unfortunately, I didn't get to hear about accessibility as
mm.
part of the course. I only happened to hear about it because I chose to do an
Right,
internship at a company for 3 months, which had that
right,
focus. Otherwise, I don't think I would have heard about it either.
right.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I, whatever resources that you can point us to, I'll try to sort of list it on the podcast description. So if people are interested, they can sort of uh, follow along. I mean, sort of related to that, I mean, you are, I think you started a project, or one of the person that started a project called Accessible for All, and I'll add a link to the GitHub repo in the podcast description. So tell us a little bit about the project and how it got started.
Yeah, well, it actually got started because of just this, that I noticed that trying to get started in accessibility and find easy to understand resources is very difficult.
Mm,
Like we have the web content accessibility guidelines are all written in like legal jargon. If you try and read them, they're very heavy and dense to try and get yourself through. And just, so I wanted to create a resource that was more accessible for new web developers and possibly even designers, where you could come and, you know, learn about the different patterns of how to make different components accessible and that kind of thing. It's still, it's been going for about a year, and it's open source, so if anyone wants to contribute, you're more than welcome. Right. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more pages that could still be written. So it's very much a work in progress at the moment, but there's a few different components on there at the moment, like how to make an accessible navigation, how to make accessible buttons, links, and those kind of things. And yeah, I'm just hoping to build it up over time.
Cool. Yeah. So wonderful side project, and yeah, hopefully people will, that are interested in helping out and will join your community and start contributing. So cool. I mean, besides working on or helping out your project, how can, open source developers in general contribute to improving like accessibility on digital assets? Are there, because I was even thinking, if I go to like a project, like a repo, like on GitHub, are there like I don't know if like people use certain labels to sort of categorize like accessibility issues, but in general, what are some of the things that I mean, they don't have to be open source developers, but developers can do to sort of raise the awareness of the issue and help contribute making things more accessible. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually think that accessibility is a great way for people to start in open source, because it's so easy to find issues that it's a good way to get started. But yeah, so one thing that you can do is just go along to the website and read through like the README. Are there any abbreviations that are not explained? That is a way to like add what the actual abbreviation means in the beginning. There are tools just in the web browser. There's one called Lighthouse, or you can download one called Axe DevTools, where you can run like an automated accessibility check, which will often show you issues with, say, color contrast, and if any images are missing alternative text. It will often throw up like simpler issues that you can find. So they are all issues that you can then raise in a repo. And again, like I said earlier, just go to the site and start tabbing. And can you find like, oh, I can't reach that thing, but it's supposed to be interactive. There you found another issue. So there's all these small things you can do to quite easily find issues that you can then work on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's I mean, similar to like documentation, because I say something similar about documentation. If you want to start contributing to a community and then also sort of gauge how responsive people are, if you raise an issue related to documentation, it's usually a good sign if somebody gets back to you within a few days and welcome you and thank you for your contribution. I think it's kind of similar with accessibility issues, because of a lot of engineers or developers have a lot of things going on, so they can't pay attention to like issues on documentation accessibility all the time. So this would be the sort of good way to sort of nudge people to look at things and see if they're responsive. So I'm guessing it's pretty similar. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I mean, some of the listed tools, I'll list them in the episode description as well. Hopefully, I didn't even know about this, about like the tools for checking like a color contrast, like because I haven't. I mean, this is not something that I looked up in detail, but I think that'll be very helpful for a lot of our listeners.
Yeah.
So cool. Right. Yeah. So and any other questions from you, Daniel, or like?
No, I don't have any real questions. Just one
Yeah.
note is that like accessibility can really help for people that have like any kind of disability, but it can even help for people that don't have any disabilities at all. Like using like the magnifier glass on my computer, like it was made for accessibility things, but it can be useful for like many other cases. So you're helping everyone with it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Yeah. Or even like, you know, what you mentioned, Emma, about like acronyms. Like, I mean, sometimes that, I mean, I don't have like a disability that some people like have to fight through, but I mean, it's frustrating. Like, you know, maybe I'm new to the field and they're using this acronym like over and over again. It's like it's not even like spelled out, and then I have to do a Google search, and that's not a good experience, right? So they're just making it useful for everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah, and you know, making it more inclusive. So cool. All right. Well, I mean, and Emma, I don't know if you have anything else like on the accessibility or accessible for all topic that you want to talk about. Uh, but uh, but if not, then we have a like a last trivia question that we ask. I know you're originally from the UK, but now you've been living in the Stockholm area for a while, which is a beautiful city. Even in February, the both times I visited Stockholm's in February, but it wasn't bad. So I mean, you know, obviously, you know, I'm guessing you like the Stockholm area that now you call it home. Like, tell us something about the Stockholm area that people may not know about, and what you like about the area that you want to point people to.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I do think Stockholm is really beautiful. And so one thing that it's very I don't think it's very famous for, but is often called the longest art gallery in the world, is that all of the like metro stations, all the underground stations, all have like all their walls are just covered in all sorts kind of different art and sculptures and that kind of thing. So wherever you go down into the metro, there's always something interesting to look at. And then I thought I'd also throw in one piece of trivia because we're almost at Easter. That actually in Sweden, children dress up as witches and go trick-or-treating on the Thursday before Easter instead of well, now they do it at Halloween as well, but
hmm.
in Sweden it's tradition to do it on the Thursday before Easter.
Oh
So I
wow,
thought,
I didn't realize that. How did that start? Like, it's interesting. Like,
yeah, there's like a tradition about witches flying to a place called Blåkulla
hmm,
just before Easter, and I think like they kidnap children or something. There's like a
right,
whole story about it.
right,
But now the children dress up as witches and go around and ask for
right.
candy.
Nice, nice. Well, nice thing to do in the spring, I guess.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cool. Cool. Awesome. Well, Emma, it was thanks for coming on to talk about an important issue regarding accessibility and educating us on, you know, how many people, you know, this is, you know, accessibility challenges it just is impacting. And like I said, this is a topic that's very important, but I don't think we talk about it often enough. So hopefully this will raise the issue. Well, thanks for being on, and we'll uh, meet our audience members in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.